everyone on this call is a software engineer, at least. Maybe someone that have shipped one mobile app or two, or even those that are learning. And it is very important that we talk about this because it is what separates the normal tutorials that we watch every day from the real apps that are being shipped that people use on their day-to-day, like every day on their day-to-day life, So when we all started, just like when I did some years back, we watched some video on YouTube, we watched video from Udemy, we learn how to create a button, we learn how to create a container, we learn how to, do those pop-up menu, the bottom. Now, but at the end of the day, it doesn't still qualify an app to be production ready. It's just for the sake of the tutorials, and you just do all those tutorials and you're able to create your own screen. Then you're so happy about it, and you're like, oh, I'm a software engineer, until you are now faced with a real life project and you just realize that it is actually more than what I saw on the tutorials, that create this, adjust the padding, increase the margin. And before you know it, you jump into a live project with that same mindset. You try to replicate the design that was given to you. And before you know it, you are fast, you are happy with yourself, with what you are seeing. Then until it comes to integrating API, you run it very quickly, you watch a couple of videos here and there, and then everything looks good. But then the bugs now starts. Then they start saying, oh, this is not working. Then you try to, you start seeing issues that never appeared in any of these tutorials. And so that is why I want to talk about this topic. Yes, I'm going to show an app to show some of the things I'll be talking about. But this the purpose of this is to explain the step-by-step process that will make your app production ready, so that you don't build something that you will not be proud, I don't know, to say I built this, or even something that you cannot even finish. Because I can remember my first project in Flutter, then I wasn't able to I was unable to finish it because the problems it became more than the what's it called now? The reward, the payment, everything just got muddy at the end of it, like, oh, fix this, fix that. At some point, I just gave up and refunded and just removed my hand from the project, thinking that I'm not sure I'm going to continue this line. I know. But then over the years, I've learned that there's a blueprint to follow. And it is just not about the code, but it's about a system. So this is what we are here to talk. So now, on my slide here, I said, okay, it works, it's not equals to it's ready. Yeah, because the app work on your emulator, doesn't mean that the app is ready for deployment and push it to the app store or the Play Store, and then users will start using it and you're free. Software engineering, I usually liken it to normal engineering that we have, like hardware engineering. Before they start building a house, the architect first come and then it draws a plan, they verify that the plan is okay, then the engineers get the materials, they get the materials that will match the plan. Imagine someone building a 10-story building, you're not expecting the person to make the same preparation with someone that's just building a bungalow. So this is the way it works, and that is why it is engineering. You have to also, look at the full scope of the projects. It's not just about building the screen or writing the code. Some of those just have that tag, oh, I'm a developer, I'm a developer. But the difference between a software developer and software engineer. And so we are talking about software engineers here, people that build systems that people use every day, not people that go to write codes that say, oh, I built a screen, or I built a to-do list app, or I built one calendar app that helped me to track my day. No, no, no. It's more than this. It is about something that people can use. So, and then when you start growing, you realize that at some point you start feeling like, okay, maybe it's about the folder structure. You try to put inside the lib, you create a view, you create a model folder, you create a data, you try to separate everything the normal way, trying to make everything look structured. But the problem is that it's not about looking structured, but it's about being structured. So, when you are building a production system, it is not just production ready system. It's not just the folder. It is about what depends on what when you before you even start writing the first line of code, you're able to define that, okay, the whole maybe the variables that should be global, the ones that should be private, the ones that should not be accessed except someone have a particular access, right? Or you have to have everything structured. Like I said earlier, before you start building your house, you must have the architectural plan of the house. Otherwise, you just come up with something that we cannot inhabit in. You understand? So this is the same thing too. So you must also know how the data and state moves. You must also figure out how to detect issue. Yeah, this part is where a lot of upcoming engineers usually miss. I missed it then too. You build an app that crashes and nobody knows why it is crashing. So you have to be forced to look at the logs that contain thousands or hundreds of lines of code to be able to to find out that, oh, the modal is failing because maybe the widget tree is exiting before the modal is called, but no error, nothing. You just load, and then nothing happens. And you're like, what's going on? But it was working on my system. I know the thing is that debugging, when you're debugging and you're building with emulator, everything always work because it is not the release version. Debug will always overlook a lot of flaws. You do not have error. Debug will just give you error. You see it on the console. You're like, oh, this is the error. You fix it. But you forget that in real life, you have to let the user know. And you too also need to know what is going on with your apps that users are using. So, and then the last part of it, so that also make a system very production ready, is the release mechanics. We have um, manual method and automated method. The automated method is what we call the CI/CD, the continuous integration and continuous deployment. And while the manual method is where you build your own stuff, you manually go to build the A, B, you copy it, you put on the console, you do everything manually. So now when you are building for users, you have to factor in how this release should be done. Nowadays we have stuff like Shorebird. You want it to be automated release where the user don't have to download. You want to push updates to the existing app. You have to factor all these things before you even start writing the first line of code. So these four pillars of production is what I just basically run through now. So when you don't get the architecture properly, yeah, this slide will be shared later on. So we'll just breeze through this so that I can just show you some of these things in the real app. And the architecture is the base of everything, is the foundation. If you don't have a good plan, like the analogy I gave earlier about using a house, if you just start putting blocks down and digging the ground to put fence and everything, you might end up build something that look like a house, but might not really be a house because the basic things that need to be done before a house is built, you do not do it, which is to have a plan and know what you are building and know how to go about it. So in software engineering too, before you even write Flutter creates app, you start writing any line of code, you have to know the state management approach you are going to use. You are going to know the architecture you are going to use, whether you're using Stack, whether you're using Block, whether you're using Riverpod, anything. You have to make sure that you factor out what the total app should look like, what the app is going to be like before you even start writing the first line of code. And in architecture, that's where you also now factor folder. And this is where a lot of engineers usually base on. A lot of engineers just go and create the folders and think that, oh, they say separate the business logic from the presentation and from the data. So they just do that folder, they put one here, put the other one there, and without even knowing the full scope of the project and everything. So, but this is part of the architecture. So, why apps break is because we don't see the end-to-end of these application flows before we even start. So we build and then we react to problem. We don't supposed to react to issues in the course of development as engineers. We are supposed to see these issues ahead of time to factor that, okay, this issue is going to happen. If we have different type of users, for instance, in an application, how do we navigate? How do we make sure that the user that is not supposed to see a particular view doesn't see it? How do we handle this efficiently? The validation, how do we catch data? How do we, what if it fails? What if they're trying to log in and there is a failure, maybe network issue, there's a glitch at the time the person clicked the submit button? What happens? Is the user forced to go all over again to start the whole process? Maybe they need to register or enter a lot of data or something. So these are the things that if you don't factor it in, the application will definitely break, and then you will now start trying to fix what has broken instead of being ahead of the game. You're not playing catch up at that time. Now, you also, okay, so this is how you also on this part of the, you have to separate the UI from the function. So, when we spoke, when I talked about here, the presentation here, that's where the Flutter code, the UI view, the buttons, the form that the user is interacting with is in the presentation. But normally, we shouldn't put any function or business logic. Everything should be in the domain. That's the functions. Functions should not be made so that when changes happen here, nothing you might decide to leave. If changes is happening here, you can change it without touching here. So if the changes is the view, you can change the view without touching the business logic. So the 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 functions, everything should be in the domain. Then it should call the database and the API separately in their own structure. So that is what we are trying to show here, that the state changes via the function that happens in the domain. That's the state changes via event, and side effects lives outside the widgets. Errors are states, and also you also anticipate errors too, and also return these errors so that, like I said earlier, we know having to build an app that fails and you don't know why it is failing. So you have to figure out how to handle error before you even start your project so that you don't get caught unawares. So this is the model. You simplify your screen into when you are making a call or you're trying to, so it should have a loading state where we are waiting for the call to complete, and then it should either be success or throw the error. So you should also factor this. Yeah, before, most tutorials, they'll just, because most time when you are practicing, you always get it correctly. So sometimes you just show the circular widget project, circular progress indicator, and it just loads and then it goes to the next page. No, whether it is successful, no, whether it failed. So, and then when the user start now using it, you now start saying that, oh, it failed, or they would not be saying nothing happened. It just loaded and they did not see it just took them back. So informations like that. So then we now come to the part where I CI/CD. So now CI/CD is very important, especially when you are working in a big team. So CI/CD is the process of automating deployment. I will also show us in the Flutter projects after this on how CI/CD is implemented, especially with GitHub Action. So it is a process where, normal way is that you maybe push your code, you build your Flutter build, you go to the folder, copy the Flutter build, then use it wherever. Maybe you want to put it on a drive or put it on a store or anywhere you want to put it for the sake of maybe people that want to test the application that you built. So now it's always very reliable to set up a CI/CD so that a GitHub CI/CD in the code, so that once you just make sure that you run the code, everything is working fine. You set rules also in the CI/CD guide. Then when you push to a particular branch, maybe your branch is deploy, or maybe your branch is main, any branch you choose. Once it gets to that branch, then the CI/CD triggers and then run the necessary tests to ensure that there is code stability. The parameters and the rules that you've set are already in place before the code now builds. And if you are pushing to Play Store, it can also help you to push to Play Store for internal testing purposes, though that is quite complex and we may not be setting that up now, but I will just show us how it works basically. And if you are using Drive to share with your team so that they can test the new features, you can also connect it to the drive, the pipeline to deploy to the drive, to upload to the drive automatically. So the process is always, it's run the Flutter test, they analyze, it checks all the rules that you have already set in the CI/CD, and then it goes to build, and then it finishes by doing whatever you want it to do. If you want it to just stay there, you can leave it, but the purpose of using CI/CD is for deployment. So basically, you're going to connect this part, the station 3 to maybe what is it called now, to the necessary location you want it to upload to. Maybe you want to put it on a drive, or you want to put it directly for internal testing on the Play Store or App Store for the sake of distribution with your team members. So it is just simple like this, and these things happens automatically each time you make a merge, or you make a push request to the exact branch that is set to trigger the pipeline. So now we come to the last part of it, which is the feedback, where I said that you need to know what is going on with the apps that your users are already using out there. So you don't really have to wait for users to start shouting, oh, this is not working, this is this. So you pick one of these tools. This is like the one that everybody uses, even me too, the Firebase Crashlytics. And you run so you integrate it in your application such that when it starts failing on user's device, you start getting the logs and start knowing what is going on, and maybe fix it before the users start complaining, and and you start trending. So this is just a summary and run through of the production checklist. You have to make sure that your boundaries are well defined, the states are predictable. You should know what happens before. When you click a button, you should know what is expected to happen, and make sure that it is implemented according to the requirement. You should also use CI/CD for automated build, so that the pipeline will help you to do the check and the code quality. Then you should also make sure that you know about the failures before the users report them. And security-wise too, yeah, secret management and secure storage. Just make sure that things that need to be encrypted are encrypted, and you don't store things that are not necessary, or you don't console log and leave them after development. You should clear up with your develop. Just follow the basic security management protocols to ensure that you don't log user ID on the console and then build and send it that way. Because there are tools that when people that install your apps, they can use some tools to extract user informations if they are exposed that way. Make sure that you don't put secret API keys into your code. Use .env, and ensure that you don't push .env to the GitHub. So this is just the summary of the production checklist, or that help you to build production ready Flutter app. Yes. The next thing is I'm going to use one of the projects. Yeah, because this time is quite short, so we can't start building an app from scratch. But I'm just going to use an existing project I'm working on currently to just show some of these guidelines that I already stated. Okay, so this is the typical Flutter project. We start from main. Okay, so this project was built with the state management that we used on this project is Riverpod, and we can see it in the main that we can see the provider scope. And yeah, so what I explained earlier in the slide is not working. Okay, for the purpose of this demo, I'm using Riverpod, but it doesn't mean that it's only Riverpod that you can use this kind of flow. And yes, a disclaimer here. So the guidelines I gave is not written on, it's not cast on stones that, oh, this is what you must use to make your app production ready. Like, I mean, I mentioned Crashlytics. There are other tools that you can use for feedback. You know, when the code I'm showing currently is using Riverpod. You can use stacked architecture. In fact, that is my favorite architecture, stacked architecture. We can use, because of the MVVM, you know, you separate the view from the view model, and it's just very straightforward, the model, view, and view model. So you can use a block. Yes, you can use provider, you can use getX, but this process aligns with all any state management approach that you decide to use. So there's no there's no place that it must be one particular state management or maybe a particular tool that I showed in the course of showing the slide. So if you look at the project structure, you see that here we have the core, and I have the features, and yeah, the core and the feature in the lib folder. So in the core, that's where I have the setup for the API and the configurations that I used. So this configuration is for the payment platform, revenue cards. I'm going to show the app also where I kept my app constants and the failures rate, the screen, the failures and the routes, that's for the navigation, and also what's it called now? The theme for the the colors that we use of the app, the night mode, the light mode, then the text styles. That's so for consistency sake, it's always advisable to define your text styles and the font size and everything you want so that uh, also for performance reasons too in Flutter, so that each time, because if you have to instantiate the class every time, if you call it in several places, it affects the performance of your app too. And that could be a thing too in production. You know, on the development, you will not really notice it. So I have the team and the rest. So, but why I'm more interested is in the features. So the features is where I set the screen of this project. So if I pick let's say the subscription screen. So you can see that I have the structure here, the data, the domain, and the presentation. So if you go to the presentation, that's all the screen that are in my subscription section of this application. So I have the screens here. So you can see that the screen here is basically code. So I call the functions. Inside the functions here, you can see that I call it from the domain. So you see for here, I'm checking the up provider to see if the user has paid or the user have not paid, so that they can see the premium feature. So I have the premium feature in the application that I'm going to show, and I'm using. So this screen, basically what I'm saying is that if I should make any change in the UI here or refactor this code, yes, I also want to mention about refactoring code too. So if I refactor the code UI wise, maybe the developer, the designer said, oh, we're changing design, we're going through this way. I can make changes here without touching anything on the feature. So far, the flow did not break, the flow did not change. And even if the flow change and we have to introduce maybe new buttons or new screen, new components on this screen, I will just introduce them here and then call wherever it is that that it is going to get the data from without going into the whole application. So because I've seen some young developers that because of the complexity of, I say, state management, so they decide to, put everything together. Inside here, you see people using function, calling function, writing the functions fully inside the view. And if anything now happens and you now start trying to refactor the code, maybe you fix one button and maybe touch mistakenly, you cause a function, maybe an async function that is supposed to wait before and that thing is called, you remove the await function, or just something happens and then everything starts scattering, and you are now very scared to make updates to the application because the approach that was used. So the same thing too for the domain here. So when you go to the risk, so this is where um the JSON model, yeah, so you go to the repository, okay, so I don't have any repository for this particular, so let me check the portfolio and check. Okay, so currently I'm not, okay, not done yet. Okay, so on the data part, then the data source, I have some mock data that I'm displaying, but I did not have to hard code any of this into the view so that the user can see. So I will run this app now so that what I'm saying, I don't know if it will. So basically, I'm just showing us that the structures were followed in this code with the whole separation of logics from the presentation, from the data. And what I want us to do together, but I've already started it before this call, is the CI/CD. So now when this application, so this is the application that I was just trying to show. So now I have not set up the CI/CD completely. I just so now the process is to create the github in the root. That's the recommended way to set up CI/CD in a Flutter app, which is to create a folder called .github on the root folder that is inside the roots of the app. Don't create it inside another folder. Don't go into Android or into your lib folder. So in the root, you're going to create .github. Then you're going to create workflows folder inside it, and then create the flutter underscore ci.yml. So now what you do is you add this to the Git. So you push it with the GitHub. So if you go to Git ignore, you can remove it so that it will be among the stuff that will be pushed to the GitHub. And then this is the code. So you will set the instruction that on push, and then you will tell it the branch. So let's assume I have another branch called develop. So this is where I will write the develop, and you know tell it that it is from the develop branch. But for the sake of this, I'm using main because that's the only branch I have now, because I'm the only one working on this application. So now, like I said earlier, the purpose of using this CI/CD is to actually streamline deployment when you are working in a team. Sometimes when you are working individually, it might not really make that difference to you, especially when you are working on a very small project. But when you are working in a team, and a lot of everybody is working on different feature, and one thing about working in a team is that we have this issue where you already set a rule that, oh, we should write our code in this structure, and someone decides to write in a different structure, and then the person now push, and this can be part of the catastrophe that happens in working with a team. So someone use their own code. So now these rules are supposed to check. There are some CI/CD links that you can set that, okay, check this, check that, in your GitHub input. And then if anybody pushes and they do not follow those rules, so there'll be those errors. So it will not allow their push to be successful. So that way they don't overwrite what other people have worked on. But now let's assume, which I'm the only one, definitely. So you put the branch, and then you use the version, you put the step. So the setup, you will set up Flutter, you put the channel, because you are putting the channel on GitHub. You will install a dependency. So what is going to happen is that when you push, it's first install a stable Flutter, and then install the dependencies, do a Flutter pub get for this particular project that you have pushed, and then analyze it. So now, if in the case of analyzing it, it fails, it will show you a warning. Let me go to my GitHub. Sorry, I'm having some issue with this GitHub workflow. I don't know why. I've been trying to trigger my payments. So GitHub is saying that I cannot run any instance of workflow. until my payment is successful. And I've been trying for some hours now, and my bank is giving issue. So, but basically, what happened is when you push to GitHub, so on these actions, when you write all this code, this is the standard. Yes, you can write um, extra setup, but this is just normal to push. So it run the Flutter test. So now if you have tests in your application, currently I've not written the test. So but if you have tests, this is where you will put the test. So now you can put test for widgets, you can put test for maybe risk insight screen. So you can write all your tests here. So what happens is that on the pipeline, once you push, it runs everything. It runs the test. If any of the test fails on the pipeline, your deployment will stop. You can see the logs and see why it failed. Maybe there's something that you stated that, oh, this is supposed to expect to have this, but it is not. When you've written your test and you say, okay, I expect my code to do this on this page, and this should be the outcome of whatever I am doing. And then maybe for whatever reason you missed it and you forgot to implement it correctly in the main code. What happens is that when the test runs on this pipeline here, it will fail on that particular place and let you know that, okay, according to the test, it's expecting to see a particular parameter. Maybe let's just use this widget test. So it's expecting to find a test called font pilots, but for whatever reason, maybe you mistakenly wrote font plots instead of font pilots. That is an error that you did not notice maybe when you are writing the code in the. So when the test find out that, oh, there's no font pilot in your code, it is font plot that is there, it fails. You see the log, you see it there that, oh, this thing failed because there is. So if the logs is going to be something, I can't see it here. I wish I could just see what the logs so that I can show you. I need to fix this payment issue. But anyways, so it's going to tell you that it couldn't find the font pilot in this particular screen according to what the test file test case that you wrote is expecting. So you will now have to correct it and then push again to GitHub. And once you push again, so let me just make a small change. Let me just write okay, let me just make a little change. Let me call it form pilots so that I can be able to make a push so that you just see that it works automatically. So if I do git add git commits, so when you push git push, so you see that we are on branch main here. So when I push to branch main and this goes to branch main, so when we come to this place, you see that fixes on title. It tried to run. Now, the reason why it did not work is that GitHub action workflow is telling me that I can't execute anything until my payment information succeeds, which I'm having issue with making it succeed currently. So, but what is expected after, assuming this was cleared, will be that you'll see a green, it will be a rolling check mark. So you will see the logs coming in, oh, Flutter test successful, Flutter build successful, then it will follow through with whatever requirements. So now if you wanted to go to the store, let's say you want your build to go to the store, or maybe to upload to a particular Google Drive link or maybe OneDrive. So this is where you are going to write the cases. For the store, you are going to need some keys like you'll need the service JSON key. You'll need a lot of information from your Play Store console, and you will put them here. So letting it know that, okay, after building successfully, now try to connect to this particular place. I think I have another project that's, let me see if I can open it and quickly show us, and so that we can see a hint. But now there's no need of trying to run it because Play Store GitHub will still stop me from pushing it. I'm trying to get some. Just give me a moment. Sorry. So I'm trying to find. So now you see on this place, this is for Azure DevOps. So it is similar to GitHub, but Azure DevOps is another, just like Bitbucket too, but it's owned by Azure. It's owned by Microsoft, yeah. So it's something like GitHub. So you have to, give instruction on how to install the Flutter. And for GitHub, it is very straightforward compared to this. Then you tell it to, after catching, to configure for Android, then to, this is for the store. You see that I have Android key store password, Android key alias, and you set up every store information, tell you to. So this particular project, if you build and you push to the main branch or to the test branch where I was working on, automatically the pipeline triggers, and then the results will be an app bundle, then of which it will publish and push to. I commented this space out because some issues were happening. So, but that's for the Play Store. So for here, it will try to deploy to Android Play Store. You see that this is the instruction, and automatically, so you don't really need to go to your console. So I put in all these scripts to show me the progress of, okay, when it deploys successfully. The commented versions are for the App Store. App Store was throwing up issue the last time I worked on it. So I only worked with Google Play Store. But that's the importance of um, using CI/CD. So everything happens automatically. The normal process would have been, do the key signing, do your signing manually, then build the AAB file, copy the AAB file, create a new project on the Play Store console. And when you create a new project, you now drag and drop or upload your AAB file, and then you wait for it to run, finish. And when it is done, you will try to publish and then wait manually. So all these things are, and sometimes a lot of people don't really know how to go to the store. And also, yes, sometimes it's not even wise to have multiple people having access to your Play Store console. So in a team where there are a lot of people working, you can't give everybody access to this particular place because it is not safe to do that. And CI/CD will help everybody on the team to be able to deploy. And yes, the deployment will also be stable because the rules have already been set on what should be allowed to pass. And so once those rules are followed appropriately, the deployment will happen successfully and without them having access to this console at all. So they'll be able to deploy smoothly and everything works. But imagine if a team doesn't have a CI/CD and one person have access to this platform. So if that person cannot, if that person cannot, deploy at that moment, everybody have to wait until the person is available before the deployment happens because that person only has the access to this console. So that is it on deployment. So the last part is the the feedback loop. So this Firebase Crashlytics. So on this project, I don't have Firebase Crashlytics because it's still an ongoing project. In fact, it's still a very new project. It just started about 2 weeks or a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So the process, there are two ways to go about setting up. There are two ways to set up Firebase Crashlytics on the project. So the first step is manual, which is to go to Firebase and sorry, give me a moment. I want to open. So where is Firebase console? So it's to go to Firebase console and create the project. So you will go to console. Then you create a new Firebase project. You will, whatever the name is, maybe let me say fund pilots. Then you will enable Gemini, whatever you need, and also enable the Google Analytics, which is compulsory. Because if you disable this, even if you put the service JSON, the Google JSON file inside your project, it won't return the analytics because you did not set it. So this has to be on. Then you select the accounts. I will say the default account for my Firebase here, and then you create the project. You see the part where you have to so let's just wait for it so that we can see the next page. I think it should show us the page where you will enter your app ID and the rest so that you can download the JSON file. So let's not waste a lot of time, but you will put and download, then you will copy the JSON file. And so this is the part here. Tell us about your app. Okay. Gemini AI is trying to help me. Yeah, so this is it. You have to add the Android version of the app, and you will do com.pilot fun. Yes, fun pilot, sorry. Dot fun pilot. So you can give it or you can leave it. Then when you are done putting this, you will get a JSON file, which you are to copy and put inside your. So you see this JSON file now. If I download it, I will basically take it to. Let me go back to my projects. So I'll have to go to Android here, then go into the app folder here and paste the JSON file inside this place. And then for the iOS, you're going to go to iOS and you are going to download. So for the iOS, you are going to manually go to this place again to a new project and add iOS app. You have to put the app ID manually too. So this process is a bit long. So the most recommended way, and also that saves you a lot of time, is to just run this command in your projects, which is so that will be that pub add, no, that pub global. That pub add is for adding a package. So you activate Flutter Fire CLI. So it's already installed on my project, but if it is not installed, you will get the whole installing messages and everything. And then when you are done, you will run something on Flutter configure, Flutter Fire configure. So this method is very reliable because it's going to put everything in the right place that it's supposed to. So it's fetching available. So now I've not added my project to Firebase yet. So it's asking me now, do you want to create a new Firebase? So if I say yes, it will say enter a project ID. So I'm going to call it fund pilot here. So basically you can set it up using the command line and you will add the Firebase core and also, okay. So there's an error. I think this error is because my Firebase is not enabled. It's not I think it's still connected to this payments related issue. I'm having bank issues today. What's going on? Okay, so but basically this project is supposed to create the JSON file and automatically add it to the app folder if it is successful. And then you will run the Firebase core and the Firebase Cachelytics inside the pub space. Firebase, see Firebase core. So You don't need the Cloud Firestore. You just need the Firebase core and Firebase Crashlytics. So you run the Flutter pub gets, and once you initialize it, you go to your main and do firebase.initialize in the main project. Once you initialize dot initialize Firebase in this main here, then you go to the Gradle and add the version. That's the com.firebase. So all these things that I'm just showing now, there's no way I can verify it, but you go to the build script here. Okay, sorry. And where is the build.gradle? No, not in the source here. So you go to the build scripts and so Android/build.gradle. Yeah, this root folder Gradle, and you add the build script here and put the Firebase. Yeah, so you put see that so you add the Firebase here in the dependency. You do something like this, class paths. Then you do com.google.firebase. Yeah, so when you run this, when you have this here, and this is not correct, this one is out, then you will go to the app level build.gradle, this one here, and add Firebase Crashlytics here too. So it will be somewhere like this. Yeah. I think it's already getting duplicated already. So you will add the mapping file enabled as true. That's all you need to do. So when you just finish this thing, you will run the project. And if you now go to your Firebase console, you can see the logs for users that have installed your apps on the Firebase console. For the app, you'll be able to see if it crashes, what made it crash, maybe the way you normally see when you are working on your Flutter in the debug mode, and then something happens and you now see that, oh, error, it is the particular screen, or maybe it's a purchase error. So you exactly know where to go and fix the issues that you had. So this is just the same way it works, just that instead of you now running it on local to be able to see all these logs and error that it is showing from the user's real device. So when the user is using it, somehow the app crashes, you'll get that crash information on your Firebase console, and you are seeing the crash, and you are knowing that, okay, the crash happened maybe because it is the person's phone, is not something that you have to do. Maybe sometimes the crash can happen because the phone doesn't have enough memory. And then like sometimes in January, we have an app that we shipped sometimes ago, like early last year, and it was not used because it's for a particular client. And the clients waited until late last year before they started using it. And so on our own company dashboard, our Firebase, our own firm Firebase console, we could see that they were crashing. And before you knew it, those people started calling, oh, this app is crashing. And when we checked, we realized that it is out of memory error. So we realized that most of the devices that they were using were low RAMs, maybe like 3 gig RAM, 2 gig RAM, 4 gig RAM. So sometimes when they're trying to do particular function on that app, the because the app has an image compression algorithm. So when they're trying to run the image compression algorithm, the app crashes. But those that use 8 gig RAM of phone and 12 gig RAM, and as the case may be 6 gig RAM, they weren't having that issue. So that's information helped us to, create an isolate in Flutter that will allow that image compression algorithm to run on a different thread so that it doesn't block the main thread which the application is running on, which is the main reason for the crash that they were experiencing. And when we pushed the updates, the client reported that everything was clear. And when we looked at our own end too, everything was already clear from our own end. So this is part of the things that, I mean, there might be more to this, but this basically will set your app at production level, and your app will be, you even have the confidence to be able to, ship without getting scared that, oh, things might collapse or things will crash. So this is my own summary of everything. So thank you so much for your time, and thank you for listening to my talk.